I'm not a Rams fan. I am not emotionally invested in the Rams. I don't care if they win or lose, but I always make it a point to watch every single Rams game because this team is just fun to watch. They're good TV. They're very talented. They have a fun coaching staff that I love to study. Their front office is great. Their social team is great. Their media team is great. Like, they put out great in-house content. It's just a fun organization to watch. And in a lot of ways, I'm jealous of Rams fans that they get to root for that kind of organization that, like, from top to bottom just seems to have its shit together. Like, even in a rebuilding year last year, they were legitimately really good and were very close to making an NFC championship run. They have young talent that we love to talk about. They nail the draft every year when they decide to actually have draft picks. Like, it's just a cool team. Like, I'm excited for this episode.
Yeah, top down. Sean McVay is one of my favorite NFL coaches, and I don't want to say I was out on Sean McVay. I never was, but I had large questions about Sean McVay. He had a lot of early success, and I was like, all right, he knows what he's doing. Then it really felt like the league caught up, and I was like, aha, now we're going to see. Now here's the test. Is he really a good football coach, or was he just that flash in the pan that was going to have his moment and move on? And he relentlessly innovates and self-scouts, I think, as hard as anybody in the NFL. I find that a completely, like, endearing quality as a football coach. I want to watch his team and his offenses because of that. And really, the organization, I think, has kind of molded itself around that identity of, like, he's leading and we believe we're going to follow where he's going. And so everybody's falling in line. And now they have this team that can get through seemingly unsurmountable stuff pretty quickly. Like, you know, after the Super Bowl, we're like, ooh, okay, so you got to pay the piper. There's, you know, you're going to have a few lean years here. And it was like a year and a half.
I guess we'll just be mid for like a little bit and then go back to being great
we'll just
again.
be back to, like, pushing the envelope again. And I love the aggression. I love a ton of their young players. I even like the writers that cover the Rams. Jordan Rodriguez, one of my favorite NFL writers, focuses on this team, tells great stories. Yeah, they're a fun follow.
Well, if you couldn't tell, we're really excited about talking about Rams today, of course, in front of the downtown LA skyline, because we like to stay on theme here on Bootleg Football. If you're new here, this is part 14, 15, whatever it is, of a part 30 or 32 part series where we go team by team, division by division, and kind of go through the off seasons and 2024 projections for every single team. So if you're new here, you have a lot to catch up on and a lot to look forward to. With that, Jay, roll the intro. Welcome back to the Bootleg Football Podcast. I'm Brett. That's EJ. Talking Rams today. Like we said, very excited for this episode. It's a fascinating team full of a lot of talent that we just adore. Whether it's this draft class, last year's draft class, they have stacked their roster in ways that very few rebuilding teams have been able to do. Like, on paper, we like to say, oh yeah, we can find those day three gems. We can find star power all over the place. We can spend our money responsibly, and very few teams actually achieve that goal. The Rams have actually achieved that goal. They are finding star power all over the place. They are doing responsible contracts while also paying top of market deals to the guys they have to pay top of market deals to. It's a remarkably well-run organization, and I know there were doubts about their ability to kind of keep that gravy train rolling after the Super Bowl, but they're the blueprint of how to do it. Like, they are honestly not even the blueprint of just how to rebuild a team. They're the blueprint of how to run a team. Their ability to kind of go through waves, go through cycles of success without ever really losing that much ground. It's an insanely well-run organization.
I feel like that mind meld between McVay and Les Snead is this sort of mad scientist genius, because a couple of years ago, people were looking at what they were doing and going, they're off their rocker. Like, they have gone completely off the rails. They're drafting guys that aren't even on our board.
They don't have a first round pick for like 6 years.
They're loading up on 6th and 7th round picks. This will never work. They're never going to be able to keep the cupboard full, field a competitive team. This is just the way they're getting through the doldrums. And they were adamant that no, this is very purposeful. We're trying to zig where other people zag and pick up value that you don't see that has large meaning in places that really matter to us. Everybody was like, yeah, sure. And now that it's worked, I can say, after last year, it definitely worked and now is working. A lot more people are like, we all thought they were completely nuts. And it's working. What are they doing that we're not? Which pieces, which corners are they shining light in that we're not even looking at? How can we adopt some of that? Whereas 2 years ago, everybody was like, just kind of laughing it off. And so it's fascinating to watch. And they've been resolute. And again, look, the mad scientist in the movie always laughs. And everybody just thinks they're laughing because they're not connected to reality. But they were laughing because they saw this path. They've followed it. It's worked. And now the rest of the league kind of turning around and going, maybe it's definitely not so crazy. How can we get a little bit of that in our organization? And it's so cool to watch because they are on the leading edge of that in a lot of ways.
If you look at like a lot of the content about how the Rams build their roster, whether it's the stuff on their YouTube channel or it's Jordan's work with The Athletic, you get the sense of how differently they build their team compared to a lot of the NFL, which is maybe a little bit more old school in some buildings, right? Especially that have leaner staffs or maybe less forward-thinking people at the top. The Rams are very open to embracing analytics and especially kind of like the new frontiers in the analytics world that help them identify edges and identify like what, not edges, like edge rushers, although I guess technically, literally, yes, with Jared Verse, but I'm talking like competitive advantages that they're able to identify through analytics and through, new advances in like sports science, new advances in neuroscience, and combining that with just straight up old school talent evaluation. But they're able to identify players, especially values in players, at a higher hit rate than other organizations because they're so willing to invest in new ways of thinking and diversity of thought. And like that is their superpower. I think that's why they've been able to stay relevant despite not having a first rounder for over half a decade.
Yep.
And all the crazy shit they've done with the salary cap, manipulating things with void years and because they have an owner who's willing to just write the check and say, go have fun, Les, do whatever you got to do. Like, it's just they do things so differently and at such a high level compared to a lot of other organizations that aren't willing to take those risks, that aren't willing to invest in those, I don't want to say futuristic, but new age ways of thinking. But you see the results on the field. Like, you see, like, this team just refuses to be bad despite all of their cycles of success. Like, they've never really gone in the tank, while other teams that maybe don't embrace those things have gone in the tank repeatedly or never got out of the tank. Like, that is the difference. That is why they're successful, and it's why they're probably always going to be successful.
Yeah, they've been the first to do quite a few things. They were one of the first teams like not to send a large contingent to the combine. Mm-hmm. And I remember the uproar. I was like, well, all the other teams, like, well, you have to. Like, there's just so much here. You have to do it. And the Rams said, no, again, we're going to do it. We're going to replace it in other ways. We're going to look at efficient ways to spend our time. We're going to get the data we need to, but we don't need to be there en masse to do that. Like, we're going to do it differently. And a lot of people kind of thumbed their noses at that and said, nah, it doesn't work, right? There's a reason everybody's always done it this way. And the Rams have been first consistently in saying, no, we're going to do it a different way, and it's going to work.
I think they were also the first team that just stopped playing their starters in the preseason entirely. Like,
yep.
They just
McVay was
zero snaps for anybody.
And he took a huge amount of garbage for that. And everybody said you're going to be rusty and you're going to drop a couple of games at the beginning of the season. All, valid concerns based on the way things had been done previously. But they said, again, the advantages outweigh the disadvantages, so we're going to do it. And McVay has a real sort of strength of conviction that he believes and it pays off. Mm-hmm. And that makes the next time that he or Snead or both of them say, we're going to do something that nobody's done before, or stop doing something that somebody always does, they've got some leash now, some leeway because of the proven track record of success, where people, I think, are even coming around to that a little more quickly, maybe even before they're through a full cycle and going, well, the Rams said it works, and we've seen them make a lot of things work with absolutely no support. Maybe we should think about doing that. And it's less wait and see and more, hey, I don't want to be that far behind, so maybe we should try and catch up here.
It's a fun organization, man. We have so much to go over today. We'll recap 2023 and how they were able to have success. We'll talk about scheme. We'll talk about their draft. We'll talk about free agency. We'll muse about Aaron Donald's great career and how sad we are that we're not going to get to see him play anymore. A lot to go over today. But before we start, I do want to thank Underdog Fantasy for helping to make this show possible in the first place. If you're watching this from California, like we are right now, of course, Underdog is available in California, whether you're doing pick'ems or season-long pick'ems. Right now, at least as of the day of recording this, what is it, June 20th? There's only one season-long pick'em for the Rams, which is Matthew Stafford at higher, lower, 4,000 yards flat. You would think that would be easy.
Nope.
Only 10 guys did it last year. Stafford was 11th. That's only because he played 15 games. But if he plays 16 games, he probably would have hit it. But that is available if you guys like doing season-long pick'ems, or if you do best ball drafts, or if you do baseball, if you do golf. Like, there's so much available on Underdog. If you're watching sports this summer, you're waiting for football to come back, you want to play along, or if you just want to do best ball drafts, anything is available to you. So check out Underdog, see what you want to play. You can go to the QR code on the screen or at the link in the description below. Promo code BOOTLEG is going to give you up to $250 in bonus cash and a pick'em special in the lobby. So thank you once again to Underdog for making this show possible. Now, EJ, let's get to 2023.
2023 was an interesting year for the Rams. They ended up going 10-7 in a year where they were fielding an extremely young team, and I don't think in general the expectations leading into last season were anywhere near that high. A lot of people thought, hey, maybe they win 8, maybe they win 9. They won a commanding 10. They were second in the division, 5-3 at home, 5-4 on the road. Very balanced team, and 4-1 over the last 5. And typically, teams that do well over the last 5 tend to carry momentum into the next season. And I think in this particular case with the Rams, that is absolutely true. They are coming in on a roll, on a hot streak, and look to continue that, as opposed to some teams that have had, yes, major changeover. We'll talk about Aaron Donald and his meaning on defense because it's not insignificant, but also they weren't caught terribly unaware by that. They have been planning for this, and they believe they can replace a lot of, if not all, that production. So a couple of numbers to sort of parse these results from last year, which were extremely good. QBS is the first one. Quarterback support. It's a new stat that I put together in the last few months with Arjun Menon, who now works for the Jets in an analytics capacity. It's 3 stats on offense, a defensive stat, and a special teams stat to really sort of say, how did this team set the table to win? How much support did this organization sort of gather and assemble and put out on the field so that their quarterback could win? It's a 0 to 100 scale. Worst team in the NFL is a 0. Best team in the NFL, 100. The Rams were a 67.7 in QBS. That put them 11th out of 32 teams. So that's how they set the table. How did they actually do? We talked about their win-loss results, but last year we introduced you to PowerScore. PowerScore is simply taking 6 statistics: rushing offense, passing offense, rush defense, pass defense, points scored and points allowed, assigning their NFL rank. Where did they finish? Were they 10th? Were they 15th? Were they 30th? Taking those 6 numbers, adding them up, dividing, and you get a score. Everybody would love to be number 1 because that would mean you're the best in everything. So lower is better. The Rams' power score was 12.8, and that put them 8th overall. So with their QBS being 11th, which is the how should they have done number, and their power score being 8th, which is the how did they do number, they actually overperformed their support. They picked up a couple of wins, ripped off a couple of wins through coaching, game management decisions, excellent performances. They basically outperformed the level we expected them to, which is shown in that 10-7 result. This is a team that overperformed, and the numbers say they did.
Over the last 6 weeks of the season, you could argue that they were like a top 6 to 7 team in the NFL. Actually, not even could argue. Like, I will argue they were a top 6 to 7 team in the NFL. And they were a very young roster, that was missing, some veterans early on, most notably Cooper Kupp. This time last year, we did an episode where they had, at the time of recording this time last year, 36 rookies on the roster. They had a huge draft class, bunch of UDFAs, very young team. So they dropped some games that they probably shouldn't have, or rather wouldn't have if they were played later in the year. Right?
Correct.
The Bengals game was a weird one, most notably. I think that was like week 3. It's just kind of an odd game. Again, young team. Young teams are going to lose. So yeah, they were a 10-win team when their metrics suggest they should have been an 11 or 12-win team. But I think the real Rams were the ones that you saw in the last month and a half when all the rookies kind of got settled, the youth got some experience, everybody had gelled, and of course you saw the emergence of Puka, you saw the emergence of Kobe Turner, Byron Young. Stafford was just playing out of his mind. I think that was closer to the actual Rams than the September Rams, and that's why I have high hopes for them this year, because 10 wins, as odd as this sounds, 10 wins kind of sounds like the absolute worst result they could have had last year. Like, just considering the early losses, I think that was their floor last year when everybody was a rookie.
But that's actually backwards.
Why is that?
Because the stats say they should have been like a 7 or 8 win team.
In what way?
QBS was 11th, and their power score was 8th. QBS is how did we set the table? What level of support did we have? And that was 11th, and they actually finished 8th. So it would have been projected based on QBS. Maybe that's an 8 or 9 win team, and it wasn't. It was a 10 win team. They overperformed their support. So yes, definitely that hot streak at the end of the season, they were a team nobody wanted to play. And that is, I'm not going to say complete reversal, but that is very far from where we were talking about this team at this time in this episode last summer. We thought they were going to be good. We thought they were going to learn some things. We thought they were going to improve, and that roster was going to get some seasoning.
We thought they were going to be plucky,
Yeah, exactly.
They were going to be fine. It's oh yeah, they're young, they'll figure it out, but they're probably not going to be great. And then all of a sudden it gets to December, and it's oh good God,
yeah, don't play Los
Angeles.
Don't
mess with the Rams.
Don't mess with the Rams. You'll get the horns, because that was the way they finished the season. And I think if you talk to McVay, he would say he fully expected that. But he and Les Snead might be the only ones. And that's typical of GMs and football coaches. They always believe their club's going to be good, but they strongly believe that was going to happen. And again, everybody followed along, and faster, I think, than anybody really thought. Again, by midseason, especially when guys started to come back, this was a team that was playing really tough football. And I think a lot of people were surprised by that. Again, looking at the young roster and going, already? They're already this good? They'll fall back to earth. They didn't. They just kept ascending. So, again, teams on rolls at the end of a year, sometimes that's sort of false. Doesn't feel at all false with the Rams. I fully expect this team to continue that trajectory and start off this year as a very tough out.
Yeah, they were as real as it gets. They gave Detroit everything they could handle. Detroit's lucky that they survived them. They barely survived the Rams. So, yeah, it's a damn good team. They're going to be damn good again this year. As far as how they were able to, get the most out of their youth so quickly, from a schematic perspective, this is where I kind of want to give Sean McVay his flowers, because the evolution that we alluded to, early in the show about how, McVay kind of got punched in the mouth a little bit for a couple years there after that first Super Bowl run, and people kind of figured him out a little bit. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, it's going to be a lot of wide zone, a lot of jet motion. Vic Fangio kind of pantsed him in 2018, and then Belichick did the same thing in the Super Bowl. And they kind of forced him to evolve and forced him to figure out new ways to run the ball. He's always going to want to run the ball, but they forced him to change, or rather to adapt to the fronts that people were giving him that were stopping everything that he originally was doing in LA, all the wide zone stuff. And you really saw the ultimate culmination of that switch last year, to the point where they ran man blocking concepts, i.e. duo, 42% of the time. This is not an outside zone team. For reference, that's as much as Miami runs outside zone under Mike McDaniel. Like, that's basically the equivalent number. That's insane. Like, that is first place in duo across the NFL by 10%. Nobody else comes close. Because Sean McVay realized, again, after that couple year stint where they just weren't getting anything on the ground. And yes, there were some offensive line issues. There were some injury issues. Todd's knee was
not great.
Swiss cheese at that point. Like, I get it. There were other contributing factors. But from a schematic perspective, people were doing to him, basically the same blueprint that Fangio and Belichick did to him. He's like, I gotta fix this. Right. So he's slowly but surely morphed his offense, first kind of leaning into a lot of inside zone. Now he's leaning into a lot of man. He's morphed his offense from an east-west run game, if you want to call it, kind of trying to find the sidelines, stretching things laterally, lots of wide zone, into a straight north-south run game. We are coming downhill. We are not in shotgun. We are under center, which is interesting because they're still 94% 11 personnel. Like, they run 11 literally more than anybody else runs anything. They're the only team that has a personnel grouping over 90% because they just stay in 11 all day. But because of who their receivers are, whether it's Puka Nacua or Cooper Kupp, who can both be fullbacks at the drop of a hat because they're tough and know how to block, like, they're still able to get under center at an extremely high rate and run these like two-back run concepts out of 11 personnel because they have a bunch of receivers that double as fullbacks. They have tight ends that block. They have running backs that are just extremely tough downhill runners. So, again, the evolution of McVay and how he's kind of adapted his system over the years, combined with, how he drafts young players specifically for this system so that they fit like a glove and hit the ground running. Like, that is why he's able to get the most out of these guys when they're brand new. Like, they are rookies, and he's getting the most out of them because he drafts them like purpose-built for this offense. He knows what he wants them to do. He's like, this is your role. You play this role. We'll expand as we go. And that's why they work. That's why they're good immediately. That's why their rebuild has worked immediately, because everything from the front office to how McVay structures the offense to how he calls the offense to how he uses these guys, it's all this big symbiotic relationship that just works.
The handshake between him and Les Snead and the understanding, because there's a lot of moving parts that we just talked about there. There's personnel pieces, there's shifts in offensive philosophy, or, you start talking about putting a book together on a GM or an organization. Well, what do they like? What are their tendencies? What do they stay away from? Like, if you did that from the start of McVay's career to now, there would be radical differences because he was literally running a different offense. So he had this, whatever you want to call it, crisis of conscience, midlife coaching crisis.
Well, he was like 30, so let's call it a quarter life coaching crisis.
Mid-coaching life crisis. And realizing, people have adapted. The NFL is cyclical. A team or a coach or a bunch of teams will push one thing and make it work until everybody else goes, well, we got to stop this. They'll stop it. And then there's, this counter adjustment on both sides that is continual. It's cyclical. There's no starting and stopping point. It's always up or down in one particular piece of that. And he had his moment where what he had was working. He's very successful with it early. It largely stopped working. There was a point at which it was no longer productive. And instead of kind of doubling down or saying, oh, if I just get that running back, it'll work, or if I just get that center, it'll work, he'll say, no. And then meshing that with Snead's perspective of, these are the organizational assets we have. We don't have a first-round pick. We can't just go out and buy this with draft capital. We do have an owner that has a ton of money, but we also have a lot of money tied up in high-priced veterans. Like, this is our organizational reality, and this is your on-the-field reality, and their ability to mix those together effectively by going sort of, again, around the edges, looking for new things, changing the offense, and doing that like quickly and cohesively I just kind of want to point out how rare that is in the NFL to have all those moving pieces moving that fast and have them move that well together in unison. I don't want to say it's unprecedented. It's extremely rare.
There's maybe 5 organizations in the NFL that I can say it about. But the Rams are the best example of it.
Yes.
Like, they're the most clear-cut example of just symbiotic relationship. Everybody is just a piece of a very well-oiled machine. God, they're so good. Like, watching the Texans and Bears for my entire life, seeing how this club operates,
Yeah.
it's like they're in a different sport.
It's like a flying car.
Dude, it's just insanity, man.
Yeah.
I also want to talk about the Matt Stafford of it all, right? Because he's a big reason why it works too. You know, his ability to connect. It's actually kind of interesting. I want to go on a little bit of tangent here. There was talk about, Matthew Stafford's not relating to all the rookies on the Rams roster and everything like that.
I remember that. That feels like ancient history at this point.
Seems like he's relating just fine. And I think it's because at the end of the day, Matthew Stafford connects with players who just love ball and they want to get better at football and they want to sit down and they want to study and they want to work. Well, that's what Puka Nacua is. Puka Nacua is a robot designed to play football. And Matthew Stafford loves those kind of guys. So he's going to connect with anybody who loves football as much as he does. And I think the Rams have made it a point to draft those kind of guys. Between him, between Kobe Turner, between Byron Young. I mean, they had like 14 rookies last year. Yeah. Like, they have a type, and their type is freakish athletes that just love football and want to get better at football, even if they're not all the way there right now. We trust that their desire to get better at football is going to carry them throughout their career, and that type has served them pretty well.
Yeah, and we're going to sprinkle in I don't want to say random, the isolated veteran that is playing at an extremely high level that is the archetype, and we're just going to count on the halo effect. Mm-hmm. So we're going to put Matt Stafford in there as really the leader of the offense and just sort of let that positive glow wash over all these very eager young football players. We're going to put Cooper Kupp in there as our archetype receiver who blocks, runs routes, is incredibly smart, prepares hard, and just let that glow wash over everybody. We're going to take all these young, talented defensive linemen, dump them in a room with Aaron Donald, who is the prototype for being physically and mentally prepared. They're not necessarily going to be able to do what he can do physically, but they're all going to want to. So we're just going to count on that sort of glow going through that room, and they sort of seed these rooms with, this is the highest ideal of what we want. Try and be like that, and we'll all be fine.
On the defensive side, I would say they also have a pretty firm identity. They're one of these teams that plays a ton of quarters, a ton of quarter half. Like, we are keeping 2 safeties deep a lot of the time. We're going to keep a tent over the top of the offense. We are going to make them drive the field, right? We're not going to blitz a lot. They were, I can't remember the exact rank they were in blitz percentage, but it wasn't super high. I do know that they were really high in terms of simulated pressures. They were 3rd in terms of running sims, which means rushing 4, but not the 4 that you might expect. So they sent linebackers a lot. They would drop their edges a lot. They would bring nickels. They would send interesting combinations of 4 guys, but still having 7 in coverage, right? And so it's a very, now I'm not saying it's a Baltimore style defense, because to my knowledge, they didn't have many coaches from that family there, but it kind of felt similar to a lot of the stuff they run, in the sense that Baltimore would also play a lot of quarters, a lot of quarter half, rushing 4, but never the 4 you expect. They would try to get free runners that way. They would try to make you panic and slide a certain direction so that they could get either AD a one-on-one, or they would sacrifice AD so they could get one of the other guys a one-on-one, like a winnable one-on-one like Kobe Turner or Byron Young or whoever. Like, they would kind of play around with all their different looks to give themselves opportunities to generate a pass rush without sacrificing bodies in coverage. Because they knew that on the back end, like, they weren't the greatest, right? So not a lot of man coverage. Like, they were 26 in cover 1. They didn't want to expose themselves to that very often. It was very much about we'll rally and tackle, and we'll try to get our front six quality looks to get to the quarterback. And not that it was like a suffocating defense, but for all the youth they had and for some of the talent holes they had, it worked pretty well.
I think they played, it's going to sound odd, they played faster than we thought they would.
Yeah, no, 100%. Now, I will say we have talked glowingly about Les Snead. We've talked about Sean McVay. We haven't talked a whole lot about the rest of the coaching staff. It's not just two guys running the show. Like we said, it's, symbiotic relationship. Everybody's a piece of the machine. They have a very, very impressive collection of assistants as well.
Especially considering that this was the staff to poach from, especially offensively, for like 5 years running. The Rams couldn't keep anybody in the office seemingly more than about 8 months without another team going, oh, you were close to Sean McVay? We'll take you as our OC.
Now they can't keep anybody defensively either because Raheem's gone. So.
Indeed. So given that level of turnover, I think Snead and McVay in particular see that as both a challenge and as an opportunity. It's certainly complementary. If other teams are rating your staff for coaches because you've been successful, that's a nice pat on the back. It does present for a lot of other teams a problem. You now have a loss that you need to replace. I think McVay and Snead tend to look at that more as an opportunity to give more young coaches. McVay famously was the youngest coach to take over as a head coach in NFL history. And I think he enjoys providing that opportunity for very bright young coaches. Mike LaFleur is the offensive coordinator. Now, he's been the Jets OC for the past 2 years. Prior to that, he was in San Francisco for 4 years, 3 as the pass game coordinator. And interestingly enough, now he has the same job his brother Matt, who's the Green Bay head coach, held in 2017.
And I think that was prior to Matt LaFleur then going to the Titans because they wanted him to do a year of like play calling experience before he could get a head job. So he kind of did like a stint under Arthur Smith as Arthur Smith's OC, and then he went to Green Bay. Again, sometimes they just make assistants do that, where it's like if you're with a Sean McVay, everybody wants to like double check that you can call plays, and so they kind of made him do that little odyssey in Nashville for a little bit. But the LaFleur, McVay, Shanahan, Saleh family in itself is its own little mafia spread out across the country.
Correct. Defensive coordinator Chris Shula was the defensive pass game coordinator last year with the Rams. Now he's in charge of linebackers and is the pass rush coordinator. So a bit of a shift, but a lot of experience with all levels of the defense. And in my mind, that can only be more useful. Special teams coordinator Chase Blackburn. If we get to the notable offensive coaches, Jerry Schuplinski is the senior offensive assistant, which is the en vogue title. If you've been listening to this series, seems like everybody has one on their roster now. Was with the Raiders for the last 2 seasons. His career began in New England, where he spent 6 years, that's 2013 to 2018, as an offensive assistant and assistant QB coach. So those were his bona fides. He's since moved on, like I said, to the Raiders and now with the Rams. Ryan Wendell. I want to shine a light on Ryan Wendell, the offensive line coach. First year as the Rams offensive line coach, came from Buffalo, where he was the assistant offensive line coach for the last 3 seasons. Now, Wendell played 9 years in the NFL as a Patriot and a Panther, and he is going to be responsible for this new look line. And when we're talking about this new look line for the Rams have drafted beef. They are telling you what they're going to do. They have tonnage between the tackles. We talked about their schematic preference for man concepts. They have backed that up in a roster preference of going, we're going to get maulers. We're going to run right through your face. They are telling you there is no disguise here, and it's going to be Wendell's job to get those guys ready to do exactly that.
I'm pretty sure their average weight in their guard center guard trio is 325. And that's, again, I'm being conservative in that. It might be 330. But we're pushing 1,000 pounds on that trio. So good fucking luck, I guess. I don't know. Like, you're just going backwards.
You know it's coming.
Also, by the way, Jerry Schuplinski. Or Schuplinski? Hold on. Schuplinski.
There you go.
There we go. He was with New England for a time, who also conveniently runs a lot of duo, which makes sense why they bring him in, because it's like, hey, guess what we're running? all the same stuff you guys ran in New England when you went on your last Super Bowl run. You know who was number 2 in duo last year? The Patriots.
Oh, I was going to say the Patriots or the Raiders, where he was.
I mean, actually, the Raiders might have been pretty far up there too.
Yeah, I was going to say number 3, number 5.
Yeah, he's got a type.
Yep. And then Eric Yarber, I want to shout out as the wide receivers coach. Again, if your position group does extremely well on a team, you're probably going to make this segment. Obviously, the Rams wide receivers have been exceptional. Outstanding.
I just looked it up. The Raiders are 3rd.
Perfect.
Sorry, keep going.
No, we're all good. So, Eric Yarber, outstanding wide receiver coach who's been instrumental in the success of certainly Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. He is an LA native who attended Crenshaw High School. Right over
just
there.
down the road.
That's right.
Well, not this. It's like 10 miles away, but that's down the road in
Ish.
California terms. So.
Oh, sure. A long, short drive away.
Yeah, it's only like an hour and a half.
Yeah, exactly. 10 miles, hour
across
and a
town.
half. And Yarber went on to play wide receiver at Idaho, back when Idaho was more of a college power than it is currently. Was also a Super Bowl champ as a player with Washington in 1988. So Eric Yarber, ton of NFL experience.
So he was with Doug Williams, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, how about that?
On defense, we have a very familiar name as the senior defensive assistant, Sean Desai. Now, Sean's been an associate head coach and a DC in the league, multiple stops, including Chicago, Seattle, Philadelphia. McVay, I think, tends to like coaches like this who have run a system that he is familiar with, but run it in multiple different ways at multiple different stops. Desai is an especially young and smart coach. Those are both candidates or qualities we've said that he really enjoys in coaching candidates. So Desai seems like a natural fit for McVay. When I read that he was on the Rams staff, I was like, makes sense as his next stop. And then Giff Smith, the defensive line and defensive run game coordinator, first season with the Rams after spending the last 8 with the Chargers, where he coached outside linebackers and was the interim head coach to close out the season after Brandon Staley, who of course knows McVay really well, moved on.
I do want to note, by the way, I'm pretty sure they've kept the same defensive verbiage going back to when Staley was the DC. And obviously, Desai and Staley kind of came up in the same Fangio world, right? Yep. So it's a pretty easy carryover. Like it's the most natural fit for where Sean was going to go, because it's like, oh yeah, we run the same stuff, quarters and quarter, half and half, quarter. Like that is my world, baby. So makes sense as a hire for them. Overall, fantastic staff. One of the better ones in the NFC from top to bottom, I would say. That does bring us to the Underdog Top 3. If you guys have watched this series, you know what it's about. We try to identify the best values, not the best players, but the best values for all 32 teams when it comes to fantasy, because we all play fantasy football. This one's going to be different, which I think I've said about all of them now. But this one really is different because it's not the Underdog Top 3. It's kind of sort of the Underdog Top 5.
Sure.
Because a couple of them kind of have to be paired together, or rather 4 of them have to be paired together. Well, we're going to start off with Matthew Stafford, who right now is going as QB 19, which sounds low because it's Matthew Stafford. However, big however, when we talked about the season-long pick being set at 4,000 yards on the dot and how he barely missed that last year because he only played 15 games, I think that is why he's at QB 19, because at his age and considering his history, people are factoring in the higher than average likelihood that he is not going to play every single game. So for you, the question I want to ask is, for what you get when Stafford is on the field, 270 yards a game, probably a couple touchdowns, hyper productive from week to week.
Yep.
Is he still above QB 19 for you just because when he's there, he's going to produce extremely well, and then you're just factoring in that you're probably going to have to draft another guy for like 3 weeks out of the year?
I feel like this is my stare directly into the camera and read a PSA. We are talking about fantasy football value. We are not talking about real football value. Real football value, Matt Stafford, well above QB 19. Fantasy football value, I actually think QB 19 is about right because of exactly what you talked about. Age, injury history, the likelihood he's not going to play 17 games, and he doesn't really add anything rushing-wise. I don't want him adding anything rushing-wise. I don't want him exposing himself to more hits and giving that back more wear and tear than it's already got. So fantasy value, I think that's about right. I know people are going to hear Stafford and QB19 and go ballistic. Real football value, much higher than QB19 for me. Fantasy value, I actually think 19 is about right.
I think the other factor is when they get into the red zone, unlike, say, a Jalen Hurts, a Lamar, a Josh Allen, like, he does not have low red zone value. Like, that is Kyren Williams and Blake Corum time, right?
Yep.
So that's also a fair factor in it, too. Which, speaking of Kyren and Blake, they're kind of tied for number 2 because I have to talk about them together. Like, this is going to be actually not even a committee. This is the committee. Like, this is the pain in the ass committee in the NFL. Because I wouldn't be shocked if they end up within like 20 carries of each other in terms of total number. Like, I really would not be shocked. Kyren was spectacular last year. I love Kyren now. I didn't love him as much as a prospect, but now he's really good.
Welcome to the dark side. We have cookies.
One day I'm going to convert you on Blake Corum. So
I saw what you did here, and I was like, oh, so we're talking about Blake Corum, are we?
We're doing both because Kyron's going as RB7, which is fair. Blake Corum's going as RB36. My argument is that because I think they're both going to cannibalize each other, I think they drafted Blake to keep Kyren fresh. Because for them, it's not about September and October and November. It's about December and January.
Sure.
So I would bet it's going to be such a hellaciously annoying split between the two of them that neither of them are going to perform like people think they will. But I think it's going to be closer to the middle for both. So if anything, I think Kyren finishes below RB7, but I think Corum finishes above RB36. But they're both going to have their weeks, and you're never going to know who to play unless you play best ball on Underdog Fantasy, where you're going to get points no matter what, he said, plugging.
Ding, ding.
But I do think that overall, like, they're both going to finish pretty close to each other. I don't think there's going to be a 20-spot gap, and I think this committee is going to really piss people off if they're not playing best ball.
Yes, I think you're right about most of that. I disagree on the balance of the split. I think Kyren will outcarry Blake Corum fairly significantly. I think their results in this offense will be similar. So yards per carry for each of them will be similar, but I do think they're going to end up leaning more on Kyren Williams in terms of number of carries. I don't think they're going to be quite as close to the middle as you think, or quite as close to equal in that as you think. But I am with you that Kyren's probably going to be a little bit below his ranking. I think Blake's going to be at or slightly above his ranking, but I just don't think those two needles come as close to each other as you think they might. So it leaves us with, since we're talking about values here, no great place to go because Blake's going to get a little bit more than his value, but not much, I think. Kyren's going to be worth a little bit less than he's probably currently being drafted at, but not much less. But that still doesn't make him a value. It makes both of them kind of a void.
I would say whoever gets the red zone touches, which we have no idea at this point, right?
No
Because
idea.
Kyren's good in the low red zone, but Blake Corum was phenomenal at Michigan. Like,
That was the
he was
one-
their hammer.
It was the one thing he did really, really well, and almost everything else he did at a below average level, but he literally scored the most touchdowns from a running back in college football last year.
I don't know if I'd say below average. Then again, I am higher on Corum than a lot of
Literally
people.
by number, he was below average in most categories.
Oh, like in terms of like yards per carry and missed tackles forced per attempt.
You
and
name it.
100%.
Yards per reception. Like,
Yeah.
He literally, statistically, was below average. He was one of the, for our position rankings, if you're a patron, when we put those up, I was really surprised. When I did that, I think I put about 20 running backs, 15, 20 running backs on that graph this year. And Blake Corum was last in almost every category, except notably touchdowns, where he was first.
And that's he is like the ultimate poster child for numbers versus eyes. And I'm not saying your eyes are incorrect, but it is kind of a leap of faith on tape for his eval because the numbers aren't good.
Nope.
Like, they're really not. So, how much did all that goal line work kind of hamper his numbers because he wasn't doing as much in between the 20s, and also, of course, he got a bunch of short yardage work where, again, it's trying to get
You need
18
one.
inches,
Yeah.
So like how much did that affect his numbers? I don't know. I'm sure it had a little bit of an effect, but like he is going to be a fascinating study in the NFL because tape wise, I thought the tape was really good. But again, you look at the statistical profile and you look at the injury history and you're like, I don't know, right? So I guess we'll see. Once upon a time, I had similar thoughts about Kyron where I'm like,
Yep.
This
This is the exact reverse for folks that are new to bootleg. I was big on Kyron Williams. I tried to convince Brett that I really liked him, and he was like, I just don't like him that much. And that happens actually fairly often for us on players, more often, I think, than people think. And Blake Corum is the exact opposite. He was like, I really like Blake Corum. And I'm like, I'm finding I don't like Blake Corum nearly as much as other people. So it's complete juxtaposition here. And again, we'll see how it sorts out.
Yeah, I would say it's a similar discussion for receiver on this team too. Again, kind of rounding out the not top 3 but top 5 by looping in Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp together. Puka's going as wide receiver 7 right now, just like Kyron's going as running back 7. Cooper Kupp is going as wide receiver 23. I love Puka. I did a film room episode on Puka. I'm obsessed with the kid. We sat here on this show last year begging and pleading for you to draft Puka Nacua.
Correct.
Because we said he was the new Robert Woods in this offense, which was about as complimentary as we could possibly be for a young receiver to be compared to Bobby Trees. Because
We love Bobby Trees.
Jinx, you owe me a Coke.
Okay.
Or actually, no, you owe me a beer. I'm gonna need a beer after this episode. It's been a long day. But we love Bobby and we love Puka, and now we saw what Puka did as a rookie. And I don't want this to come across the wrong way. Wide receiver 7 is a little much for me, not because I don't think Puka has the talent to pay that off. He obviously does. He's phenomenal. He's great at pretty much everything.
Yeah.
But Cooper Kupp ain't dead. And so I have a kind of similar feeling where because Cooper Kupp is not going to be injured for the first half of the year this year, and keep in mind when Cooper Kupp came back, they were only separated by like 2.5 points a game in half PPR. I think that's going to eat into Puka a little bit. And so I'd be willing to bet that Puka ends up more, closer probably like wide receiver 12, 13. Cooper ends up closer like wide receiver 19, 20. So one is being slightly overvalued, one's being slightly undervalued. They're probably closer to each other than you think, as long as Stafford stays healthy. Again, I don't think it's a crazy difference, but it's enough of a difference where I'm like, I don't know if I could do wide receiver 7.
It's funny that we just had the running back discussion about running backs on this team, and it's very similar positioning. Now we're having the wide receiver discussion, very similar positioning. I do think these two are going to go much closer together in the final standings, and I wouldn't be surprised if it actually swaps.
I mean, Cooper Kupp was a Triple Crown winner, guys. Like, again, he ain't chopped liver.
Here's my reasoning. First off, I'll say I want both of these guys to be healthy and on the field because when they are, one of the best wide receiving duos in the NFL, and that is not hyperbole.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what I want to see as a football fan. I want both of these guys healthy for the whole season. Let's just mash the throttle to the wall and see how far we can go because they could easily both be over 1,000. They could easily both be over 1,200. Like, they've done it before. They could do it again. Do I think that's likely? I don't. Here's my reasoning. Cooper Kupp was hurt at the beginning, significantly hurt at the beginning of last year. He missed a lot of time, and he was a little bit slow when he came back. Took him a second to get up to speed. Once he got up to speed, like you said, they were very close on the field, even with Puka having his meteoric season. Puka's injury history is the one thing we worried about. On this show last year, I said one of my football wishes for this year is that Puka stays healthy, and he did, and that's amazing. And yes, I want it to continue. Oh, there's a little nagging feeling in the back of my head that's like, Cooper's going to be healthy from the beginning of the year. Puka's going to be healthy, hopefully, at the start of the beginning of the year. He is now. Does he stay that way, or does he get a little bit dinged up in the middle? We talked about Stafford missing.
I think
some
last
games.
year was Puka's first healthy year in like half a decade.
Right. So if we talk about regression to the mean, that's likely. Just in numerical terms, that's likely now. Again, that's That's why I started with, I don't want it to happen. I'm not wishing injury on anybody. But I could very easily see a fully healthy Cooper Kupp from the start of the year crossing over Puka's value. So Puka is overvalued right now. If he's injured, obviously that value will slide. If Stafford's injured, that value will slide. And Cooper has produced no matter what when he's been healthy, and he's been largely healthy throughout his career. So it's like, what's the most likely outcome? And I would not be at all surprised if at the end of the year, Cooper Kupp is a few spots above Puka Nacua, largely just due to health.
I just think the fact that both of them are so damn good.
Yes.
If they do stay healthy, honestly, it's not even that you want Puka and Cooper. It's that you want Stafford.
Yeah.
If they both stay healthy, because good God.
He's going to put up vicious numbers. And again, that's what we want to see as football fans, is those two guys with a healthy Stafford throwing to them. Like, Kyron's great. Kyron is a tremendous player, and I think he's even outperformed what I thought he was going to do, and I liked him. Come on, folks. Stafford to Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, that's fun football.
That's like 5,000-yard season potential.
Yeah, let's just open it up and see how
They're not going to do it because they like running the ball a lot. But like, if they really wanted to, they totally could. And I think that's what makes them so great, right? Is the fact that like, okay, yeah, they're going to run it 35 times a game, like ideally, between, well, not 35, let's say 28. That's a more realistic number. They're going to run it 28 times a game with Kyron and Corum, and they're going to just pound the rock over and over and over again. Duo all the time. Rah, let's go. And then Stafford's going to throw it like 25 times, and he's going to get his 250 yards, knowing in the back of his mind that if shit gets out of hand and he's got to go Super Saiyan, he can put up 400 yards on you literally anytime he wants to.
You know what's going to happen at least once this season, and I am fully here for it because it's going to be so enjoyable.
Huh?
Some new or forgetful defensive coordinator is going to go, that Puka kid's really good, which is completely true. We should double him.
Good luck.
And they're gonna. And Cooper's going to look at Stafford and be like, are you seeing what I'm seeing?
These fucking guys.
Is this straight single coverage for a former Triple Crown winner? Is that actually happening? Stafford's going to look at him like, I don't know, man. Like, I think so. And if that's what's happening, you know what's happening. And Cooper's going to be like, yeah, I know what's happening. And all that's going to occur with like no hand signals. They're just going to look at each other and be like, they're doubling.
Just a raised eyebrow.
They're doubling the rook? Okay. And they're going to torch them. And Cooper's going to have one of those games. 212 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns. And everybody's going to be like, Cooper Kupp is back. And the DCs are going to get right real quick. And they're going to be like, we're so sorry about that. Like, Cooper, you're getting 1.5 minimum period. Let's go.
So I think what EJ is saying is 2024 comeback player of the year, Cooper Kupp.
Very well could be.
Jot it down.
Very well could be.
Let's get to free agency.
Moving on.
EJ, I'll let you take the reins on this one.
Yeah, so players that were significant players on the Rams. Again, we talk about all this roster building, a byproduct of all that roster building. Some Rams eventually have to move on. This year it was Ahkello Witherspoon. 93% of the snaps last year for the Rams, so he's not back. John Johnson, the safety, played just about half of the snaps, 45%. Coleman Shelton, the center, moves on to the Bears. He was 97% of the snaps. Again, they have a plan for that. Steve Avila is going to move over to center for them. So this is not unexpected, but this is a byproduct of that move. Brian Allen, who was also a longtime center for the Rams, he's now with the Browns. Jordan Fuller, the safety, is with the Panthers, 93.4% of the snaps. The Rams have leaned very heavily on Jordan Fuller. He's had the green dot. He's been calling the plays from the defensive secondary. This is a key-ish part. Now, again, they have a plan for succession, but that's some very important snaps and leadership leaving the defensive backfield for the Rams. Jonah Williams, the interior defensive lineman, is now with the Vikings. He played just over 52% of the snaps. So we'll put all the names on screen, but those are the ones we think are sort of most impactful. And then Ben Skoranek, we got to talk about.
I was going to say, you better not say Ben Skoranek's name.
We got to talk about Ben Skoranek, not because he played a tremendous amount of snaps in terms of a percentage, but the amount of things he was able to do on the snaps he played gave the Rams offense tremendous versatility.
He is wide receiver / fullback, but like legit wide receiver / fullback. Like I know the other guys moonlighted as that, but that kind of was Ben Skoronek's whole deal.
Calling
right?
card. Yeah.
And he's just so good at it. Like he's so good at it. And I think his build, again, he's a 230-pound weapon, I guess you want to call it.
Borderline wide receiver, tight end type was what everybody said when he came into the league.
Yeah. His blocking ability, his catching ability. Again, he's never really been used as like a receiving threat. He's got a couple balls thrown his way, but I would say just his versatility as a football player, for me, I think the reason why the Texans traded for him was the new kickoff structure. Like his ability to block in space against not just DBs, but a variety of body types. Like he took on edge rushers.
Sure.
He took on 240-pound linebackers. He demolished safeties. The fact that he can block a wide variety of body types effectively on the move at full speed, that screams we need somebody who can block people in space on kickoff returns. That's why the Texans got him, in my opinion. And also, yes, of course, playing quasi receiver / fullback. But like that's the kind of guy he is. Like that's his value to me. Like that trade is worth it in its own right if he pops one kickoff return, like for a touchdown. It's worth it right then and there.
I don't disagree. He's a tremendously fun player because in my mind, he's extremely hard to classify accurately. And I love that.
He's
like,
great.
well, he's an anomaly. He's really good. He's a great football player. And typically it's weird. That's a weird dual term, right? It either means they're not very good at the things they're supposed to be good at for one position, or they're actually good at a bunch of different things. And it's just weird.
I would classify it as he's good at the things that nobody else is good at.
He fills in gaps, and they are necessary roles on a football team. The Rams realized that very early in his career and were, I don't know, brave's not the right word. I'm forward thinking enough to use him in that way, sort of unapologetically. Like, no, we're not trying to make him into a receiver. And he's no lesser of a football player in our eyes because he's not a great receiver. We think he's a great football player, and we use him as this, and we're like 100% totally cool with that.
In terms of in-house free agents that were extended or retained, I guess you could say, Joe Noteboom, tackle, brought back a pretty reasonable $6.8 million deal. Demarcus Robinson brought back. Michael Heck brought back. Michael Hoyt. I always get that one wrong, but I caught myself. Hoyt
got it the second time.
Alaric Jackson also brought back. But I want to, of course, highlight Kevin Dotson, the $16 million man. When that deal came through, a lot of people's first instinct was, Kevin Dotson's getting $16 million a year? First of all, if you watch Rams games last year, you're like, yeah, no, 100%. That's a $16 million guard. But second of all, if you watched how the guard market exploded following that deal, like everything that happened after that deal, you're like, actually, $16 million for Dotson, pretty darn good.
Yeah. And again, forward thinking, the Rams sort of being ahead, knowing what they needed. When they signed that deal, again, I think there was hue and cry about, what are you doing? Those of us that watched the Rams offensive line were like, no, they needed to sign him. They got him for a reason. He worked exactly as they expected. They're going to pay him. Seemed a little bit more reasonable. And then, like you said, if you're first in any particular position market to a signing, very quickly, whether it's in terms of calendar months or number of signings later, you look pretty damn smart. And the Rams look really smart for that signing.
Yeah, things got out of hand in the guard market quickly.
We need the Anchorman clip right here. Whoa, that escalated quickly.
Over the course of like 12 hours, too. Like they just kept coming and coming and coming. Yeah, it was a wild day on NFL Twitter when all these guard contracts got announced. It's like, what do you mean they're making as much as receivers? And it's like, oh, don't you worry. Receivers making a lot more than that. Just wait.
Not anymore.
In terms of third-party additions, Trey White comes over from the Bills. I can't remember where he's at in terms of his rehab. I'm pretty sure he's coming off injury.
Yep.
Unfortunately, again, I got to double check on that. But longtime corner for the Bills. When he was healthy,
awesome.
was great. Yeah, I don't think he's been healthy in a couple of years at this point, but
That is correct.
we're hoping for it. It's a great player. Cam Curl has come over from the Commanders at a pretty reasonable $4.5 million deal. Darius Williams is back in LA with the Rams at again pretty reasonable $7.5 million deal, which for a 31-year-old corner, that's about as much as you can hope for. That is a position that, similar to running back, once the 2 flips over to a 3, things get a little rougher out there. But Darius Williams, still a pretty good player for now. Jonah Jackson at left guard, $17 million. So you thought Dotson was getting a lot, and of course Jonah Jackson comes in.
Yep.
When we talk about the beef in that interior trio between Jackson, Avila, Dotson, like those are 3 people movers all right next to each other. So really, really excited to see how this trio works out. Jimmy G brought over to be either the backup or the backup in LA. Guess we'll see how that sorts itself out in camp. And then Colby Parkinson, once upon a time, bootleg favorite when he was coming out. 6'7", smooth, got speed, got great hands. Comes over for a $7.5 million deal from the Seahawks. Never really achieved the potential that we thought he could have hit production-wise in Seattle, but the talent is still there. I'm still a believer.
Yeah. Flashes. Shane Waldron started to weaponize him a little bit. We got really excited using a contract year. Rams paid fairly big dollars for him to come over, $7.5 million for a second tight end. It's not top of market, but it's not insignificant either. And I want to talk about the trio of secondary players, Trey White, Cam Curl, and Darius Williams. If you go back 24 months, which can be ancient history in the NFL calendar, 24 months before Trey White suffered the first of a series of injuries when he was back on the field after having suffered an initial injury. I know that sounds terrible. If you'd said one team just got in one offseason, Trey White, Cam Curl, who was playing very, very well for the Commanders at that point in his young career, and Darius Williams, who had just signed, big dollars to go to the Jags, that's firepower in the secondary. You go 24 months later, they get him for very reasonable contracts. But again, if they're healthy and on the field, I realize this is a theme. That's a lot of power. And Jonah Jackson, got to trumpet Jonah Jackson. I was a big Jonah Jackson guy with him coming out. Thought he was going to be one of those 3rd to 5th round guards that came out, played very well in college. Wouldn't necessarily make immediate impact, although he did. He was on the field very quickly and established himself as a starter. And here he is, basically first contract after his rookie contract, $17 million to play guard and be really featured. Like, this is going to be the Rams' identity, is lining up and running people the hell over. And he's going to be a key part of it.
Yeah, if you thought they ran duo a lot last year, just wait until this year, man.
Nobody's looking forward to a day against the Rams right now that plays interior defensive line, because it's going to be all day. You know what you're getting.
And that's why I'm really excited to see how the Seahawks handle it, because, they're not going to be subtle. Mike McDonald knows what's coming, so he's spending the next 3 months trying to figure out, how do I stop this? It's not going to be fancy. They're not going to be trying to outsmart each other. It's just about straight up ass mass on the line of scrimmage. So it's how do I stop this? I'm going to play nickel all day, but can I play nickel all day against this? Is that really a good idea?
It's going to be a great test of wills, because the Rams are trying to get you out of it.
Uh-huh.
And the Hawks are trying to stay in it, and we're just going to see. That's 2 guys lining up in the middle of the ring. We both know what they're going to do. One of them's not going to want to be doing it in a few minutes.
All I know is that if they do play nickel all day against the Rams at 11 personnel, and they run the ball north-south all day long, you know who's going to bear the brunt of that responsibility?
I do.
Devin Witherspoon.
Yep. There's going to be some impacts there.
Bless his heart. That's going to be a long cold tub session.
And his shoulders and his collarbone, his feet.
It's going to be a really, really tough day for Devin Witherspoon. I mean, he'll do it.
Oh,
he's
100%.
a dog, but God bless him.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard.
A lot of leverage going on there.
All right, let's go from March into April. Talk about the draft. The Rams, once again, had a really, really nice draft. They had a first-round pick. That's a nice change of pace. And not only did they have a first-round pick, but they got their first-round pick in town in time to draft their second-round pick, who was their teammate of their first round pick and have him on the call. One of the better moments of the entire draft for me.
Super fun story of really the whole offseason. We're talking about Jared Verse, the very talented and physically gifted edge rusher out of Florida State, the 19th overall pick. There was some discussion about whether Verse would go earlier than that and what rank you really had him in the edge class this year. I thought 19th was fair. I thought it was good value for the Rams. They're obviously trying to replace a bunch of firepower on the defensive line with Aaron Donald moving on. Versus a very good first step. They do get him in town in time to call his teammate, who was one of my defensive gems, Braden Fisk, the interior defensive lineman from also Florida State, second round, pick 39, and great moment when they got to call and say, hey, bro, we're playing together again. We get to keep doing this. They were a terrific duo, a terrifying duo at Florida State. They wrecked a lot of game plans, and they hope to continue doing the same thing for LA. Blake Corum, the running back from Michigan, we talked about earlier, that was a third rounder at 83. Cam Kinchens, the safety from Miami, I thought this was a great pick. So again, we talked about the secondary players moving on for the Rams. Cam Kinchens is going to have a lot of opportunity in that secondary, and I think he's good for it. Third round, 99th pick overall. Big safety who can hit but can also run in pass coverage. Was on a bunch of preseason All-American lists. Faded is not really the right word throughout the season, but some other safeties really ascended. He didn't quite have the star power. The fact that they get him, almost in the fourth round.
I think people also got scared off a little bit by the testing numbers too. But if you're just looking at the GPS data
and the tape,
like football speed and time speed are two very different things. Like that kid has football speed.
And he is a great player. He has really good instincts. Again, he's going to have, this is where ability meets opportunity, and that is a perfect nexus for Cam Kinchens in this defense. Brennan Jackson, the edge from Washington State, down in the fifth round. They didn't have a fourth round pick, so that was at 154 overall. Brennan Jackson, more of a power rusher, and he's pretty darn good at it. They need somebody to push the pocket. Our buddy Brandon Thorne just had Carl Lawson on his podcast with Nate Tyson. They did a defensive line draft, and Carl brought up a great point about edge rushers being in pairs, kind of a thunder and lightning guy. You got the speed guy, and then you got the power compression guy. And coaches want both of those things. They want to be able to use and plan for both of those elements. Brennan Jackson is going to contribute to the power element for the Rams. That's really his game. Tyler Davis, the interior defensive line, the big interior defensive lineman out of Clemson. Talking about adding power to the defensive line. This is the power component. Sixth round. Now, here is where we start a run of 4 sixth-round picks for the Rams. So again, it's a strategy the Rams have employed for the last 2 or 3 years, collecting a bunch of later-round picks and then identifying pieces of talent. And I don't mean individual players, but within those players, specific things or roles they do or fill well. And Tyler Davis, this is about being an immovable object on the interior defensive line. They get him at 196 overall. The next sixth-round pick is a kicker, Joshua Carty out of Stanford at 209. Then Jordan Whittington, the very large wide receiver out of Texas at 213, who I think has a chance to do some of the Skoranek things, but haven't really seen that in his game in college. So the frame shows it, but I'm not sure the game shows it. We'll see how they tend to use him.
Yeah, I don't know. You got to be a little bit more of a psychopath to be Ben Skoranek. I'm not sure if he's got that much in him.
Yeah, that many
for
loose, that many loose screws.
Yeah.
And then Bo Limmer, the center from Arkansas, there was something going on with Bo Limmer because he is better than a sixth-round player, folks. I am here to tell you. They get him at 217. Again, had to add some center depth with 2 former centers moving on, even though Avila is moving over to center for them. Bo Limmer is a more than capable backup and a very good get in the 6th round. And then KT Leviston, the guard from Kansas State, they get in the 7th round at 254.
I want to really kind of zoom in on Verse and Fisk together. And again, if you're watching like the videos on the Rams YouTube about how they kind of approached that whole process, they thought about trading up for Brock Bowers, and then eventually landed on Verse. But what they really wanted was Verse and Fisk together. Like that was the goal. Was okay, we got Verse. How can we try to get up to get Fisk?
Correct.
Because again, very forward-thinking front office. We've talked about that a lot today. They saw not just good individual players, but they saw players that when they were packaged together, as in lined up next to each other in advantageous downs and distances, specifically as pass rushers, from an analytics perspective, their win rates went through the roof when they were able to play off of each other, right? And so they're like, okay, well, can we just make that happen again? Like individually they're good, but together they're better. Can we just keep that going, right? And they already have Byron Young, they already have Kobe Turner, but like, let's just add more. Again, Aaron Donald's no longer here. We got to replace Aaron Donald. Can't do it with one guy. Let's do it with 4 of them.
I was gonna say, or 2 or 3.
Yeah. And I think that really kind of played a major role in their decision to get aggressive to go up to get Fisk, because you never really know how a player is going to fit in your locker room. You never really know how they're going to fit in the defensive line, how they're going to play off the other guys, because especially in those types of positions, the unit positions, offensive line, defensive line, it is about chemistry more than people think. Yeah. Well, offensive line is often seen as a chemistry position, but like defensive line too. Like you have to be able to play off of each other, because you don't really know what protection you're going to see, and you kind of have to read and react to things and know like, okay, we have this stunt on, but if they're going to play us a certain way, that's going to change our responsibilities. It's going to change how we attack and where we attack, and it's going to change the pace. There's a lot of technique, and there's a lot of instinct, and I would even say communication that goes into like a properly executed stunt.
Yes.
It's not just you go this way, I go that way. Like there's so much that goes into it. And if guys have already done it together and been really good at it, don't fuck that up. Like just take both of them, because they already know how each other likes to play certain things. You know, if it's a 2-on-2 versus a 3-on-2, you know, is the third guy a running back? Is it a tight end? Is it the center? Like there's different ways to do a stunt based on all those different looks. Mm-hmm. You know, how are they setting? You know, are we expecting a quick throw versus a long throw? Because that allows us to kind of play around with things in terms of how we pace it out. Like there's so much that goes into a tandem of guys rushing together. And if that connection already exists, like it's worth its weight in gold. So the Rams were like, we'll pay whatever we got to do to go up and get this guy, because we already know that he and Jared are great together. So again, that's the kind of stuff that the Rams do that a lot of other teams don't consider. Like it's not just about drafting one guy; it's about drafting guys that make the one guy work, or in this case, make each other work. And they prioritize that, and that's why I think it's gonna work.
Both great individual players as well, but yes, greater than the sum of their parts. And Fisk is just an absolute animal. Like, Verse is a strong-handed power player that is very, very skilled and absolutely deserved to go in the first round. But Fisk could have gone in the back end of the first round. Complete disruptor. People will look at his size profile, say he's a little short, his arms are a little short. Look at the tape, folks. Like, go watch Braden Fisk tape. Because you'll enjoy the hell out of yourself. Like, it is a super fun watch. He is incredibly aggressive, plays at 100 miles an hour all the time, very skilled, very sudden, tough to deal with for offensive linemen because he is very strong. He's in your face very quickly. He's got leverage. He can get under your pads. We've talked about that multiple times, that slightly shorter rushers can be a real challenge for taller offensive linemen. He uses every advantage, never quits. Just a really fun study. One of the reasons he was, several of the reasons he was one of my defensive gems. Love him as a player. The fact that he gets to play with Jared on a line that already has young and developing defensive line talent. I mean, we love Kobe Turner. We got to interview him the year before. We thought he was going to be successful quickly. He was. Now you add, 2 more pieces, 3 more pieces if you're talking about Tyler. Like, fun unit.
And also just like knowing Kobe as a person.
Oh, God.
He's going to love playing with these guys.
Yeah.
Like they are so his speed. Like all these guys are going to be inseparable in the locker room. Like I cannot wait, because they're all just kind of wired the same way.
Yep.
It's all about football, all about getting better, about maximizing not just their own opportunities, but the opportunities for their teammates. Like they're very, it's a unit focused mindset for all these guys.
Yep.
And so this young D-line is going to be
I'm excited.
If you thought their offensive line was expensive right now, their interior offensive line, wait until you see how expensive their defensive line is going to be in roughly like 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
It's going to be absurd how much money these guys are going to make together.
Yeah.
Looking at the UDFA haul, throw a bunch of names on screen right now, but the main one that we're going to focus on, probably the one that has the best chance of making the team, is going to be Drake Stoops, Oklahoma's own. I can't tell you how many. Well, you would know because you probably got it too. How many DMs from Oklahoma fans did you get about Drake Stoops during draft season? Because I got roughly 3 a day for like 3 solid months.
Right around the Shrine Bowl, there was a real peak because he was at the Shrine Bowl. And you know, Drake Stoops is one of those players who is a fan favorite because he plays a very specific role and he's really good at it. And again, we've talked about the Rams' ability to hone in on a specific part of a specific player's game. And they're looking for Drake Stoops to carve up underneath coverage.
Mm-hmm.
Like, period, end of story. That's why they got him. He can absolutely run those routes and he completes the catch. He's a tough little receiver. That's it. Like, that's why they got him. They know that's the fit. Like, Oklahoma fans, you can relax. Drake Stoops is in the NFL. He's with a great offensive mind. He's got a great chance to make this roster.
It's like one of those, Mom, can we have Hunter Renfrow? And then it's like, we have Hunter Renfrow at home, and it's just Drake Stoops. It's the same guy. It's the same guy.
Yeah.
You know, several years younger at this point, but
Sure.
like that's what he is. Like,
Yeah.
he is the short area nightmare to deal with.
Yep.
Like, he's going to run option routes all day long. You're just going to throw with leverage. He's going to get first downs over and over and over again. He's going to get like 8 yards a catch. But those 8 yards are always going to move the chains. He's going to be a pain in the ass to deal with. And that's Drake Stoops. That's what he was at Oklahoma.
And since we're in LA and the Rich Eisen show is filmed here in LA, we should probably mention Josh Wallace, cornerback for Michigan.
One of the
Rich would.
97 Michigan players that went to the NFL this year. Yes.
Yes. There you go.
And they have a bunch more coming next year, folks. It's not done.
We've done our due diligence, Rich. We now don't need to be sanctioned. We're good.
Now, that brings us to the summary section, where we answer 2 questions. First question being, did this team get better, worse, or stay the same?
Better, worse, stay the same.
Exactly. It's thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs even. And I struggled with this one. I really did, because I know their result is probably going to be better this year. I really do believe that. I think they are going to win more than 10 games. I think they are going to be a legit NFC contender. However, I'm not naive to the fact that Aaron Donald retired. That's kind of a big deal. He's kind of a good player.
Aaron Donald with the shirt that says, "I'm kind of a big deal."
He's kind of a big deal. Like, literally the best defensive lineman of his generation, the most slam dunk first ballot Hall of Fame defensive tackle I've ever seen in my media life, I guess. Again, I wasn't covering the NFL when Warren Sapp was in the NFL, but I worked with Warren at one point, but I wasn't covering the NFL when he was playing. And I have to imagine the reaction was the same when he hung him up of like, yeah, see you in Canton in 5 years. Like, Aaron Donald is that. It is a no doubt slam dunk first ballot Hall of Famer. And he's in the inner circle of the Hall of Fame. He's in the very, very, very short list of greatest defensive player, not defensive tackle, not defensive lineman, defensive player ever. He's up there with Lawrence Taylor. He's up there with Bruce Smith. He's up there with Reggie White. He really is. So you kind of got to factor that in a little bit.
You do. Not only the impact on the field, but the leadership as well. Everybody on that team, and you go back to the Super Bowl, right? When they won the Super Bowl, McVay is literally on the sidelines, mic'd up for NFL Films, and he's like, Aaron's going to make a play right here.
And he did.
And he did. Rare stuff. So I'm the same. I went back and forth, and my sort of justification for this is my ranking is not a bad thing. It's a case of even but different. So I'm going to go thumbs even. I think they're going to be a better team in wins. This is much like the Stafford debate we had at the beginning of real football value. We're talking about wins versus sort of the overall team. I think the general power of the overall team is even, but I too think they're going to win more games than they did last year, and that was double-digit wins.
I would go thumbs even as well, because I don't think, again, factoring in the Aaron Donald thing, I don't think they're a better overall roster than last year, considering all the additions and subtractions. But that roster last year should have won 11 or 12 games. So it's more of a compliment than anything. If anything, it's like, congratulations, you lost one of the greatest players in the history of the sport and didn't get worse.
Yes.
So that's a win. Like, they're still going to be an 11 or 12 win team, which is why going over to ceiling and floor, my ceiling for them is 12. I think they're going to get there. I think it's a pretty reasonable shot they're going to get there and push for the first seed in the NFC, or at least one of the, top 4 seeds. I know Niners fans are probably like, whoa. Trust me, the Rams are a really, really, really big problem. So they can get to 12. And my floor is really more factoring in the potential injury questions they have. Not that they're going into the season with injuries, but they just have a bunch of guys on the roster where it's like, can they make it 17 games? Like, we'll see. So I'm kind of playing it safe and putting my floor at 9. But the fact that their floor is still above 500 speaks to how good this team is. I don't think we've seen the best of this current iteration of the Rams, or this current era of the Rams, this post Super Bowl, post rebuild era of the Rams. They still haven't peaked, but they were already really damn good. The last 6 weeks of last season proved that. They were already a top team in the league, and they're still not quite at the level where I know they could be.
Yeah, they haven't taken the full bite of the apple yet. So I'm with you on ceiling at 12 wins. Again, they were a 10-win, somewhat of a surprise 10-win team last year, even though we talked about roster shuffling and overall power of the roster being even. I think this iteration of the Rams is going to continue right where last year's team left off, which was an incredibly tough out. They're 4-1 to close out the season. They're on a roll. I think they're going to start this season on a roll. Again, Kupp is healthy from week 1. So 12 is my ceiling. 8 is my floor because they're getting to the point with some key positions. Cough, cough, Stafford. Mm-hmm. Like, I said it every year since he left Detroit, because I saw him get the hell beat out of him in Detroit in the NFC North. And he took some serious injuries. Back, shoulder. Like, he is an absolute warrior. But it's got to run out at some point. Like, the genie is officially going to leave the bottle. I don't know. I thought it was going to be 3 years ago. He's played exceptionally well. Seems like one of those guys that could just play forever. But at some point, they're going to run out of juice. And if he misses 4, 5, 6 games dinged up this year with injury, they're going to be a very different team. They're still going to win games. They're still going to be over 500, I think. But if that happened early, for instance, this could be an 8-win team. They're still going to be a tough out. They're still going to be in ball games. They're still, I think, going to be in contention for a playoff spot right to the end, even under the worst case. So that's my compliment for how good this Rams team is.
They, just like all the other teams in the NFL that have top quarterbacks, are going to go as far as their injury luck will take them, right? Because the Chiefs are not the same team without Patrick Mahomes.
Nope.
I mean, they're still great, but they're not the same team without Patrick Mahomes. Same thing with Buffalo. Same thing with Cincinnati. Same thing with, at this point, I would say Houston without Stroud. Very different team.
I mean, but take it with a grain of salt, too, because I just said, I've been saying this for 3 years. Oh, Stafford, the injuries are going to catch up with him. This is the year. I've been saying that for 3 straight years. He's played exceptionally well. So could it just continue rolling right along? It could. I could look wrong again. I just think, boy, we were hanging out with a few former quarterbacks this week at Elite 11.
I've never seen a former quarterback that doesn't have back problems.
Yeah, they don't move well in retirement, folks, and I can't imagine that Stafford's going to be a spry spring chicken bouncing around. Maybe he didn't subscribe to the TB12 method, but it's
not
hard.
Enough avocado tequila.
It's hard for me to believe that level of punishment's not going to catch up with a guy, and that is what eventually ends careers. It's a young man's game. Matt Stafford is by no means a young NFL player, still a young man overall, but I hope it doesn't, because it's better football if he's on the field. Like, Matt Stafford slinging it to this receiving core is what I want to see. Let's be completely clear about that. But at some point, man, the gas has got to run out because he has taken a lot of massive hits.
Well, I hope that was a nice uplifting note to end this episode on for you Rams fans. If you would like to shop for Rams gear or even bootleg gear, EJ's wearing a bootleg shirt also made by our clothing partner Homage. You can find our gear, Rams gear, any NFL gear, any like pop culture gear. They have video game stuff. They have Grateful Dead stuff. They have movies and TV shows, college football,
National parks,
like pretty much anything. So go browse Homage. Anything you get at that link in the description or at the QR code on the screen, we will get a cut of that purchase. So it's a great way to indirectly support the show. Thank you to everybody who directly supports the show via our Patreon. Especially our executive producer tier, couldn't once again have made this all possible without you guys. So thank you for your continued support. With that, EJ, we're going to wrap this one up. Come back tomorrow. Wait, yes, tomorrow? I think so. Oh, yeah. Niners, I think, is tomorrow. Dude, it's all a blur at this point. I can't keep track. Anyway, more football stuff coming soon. And whenever that happens to release, because I don't know schedules.
You'll see it right here.
You'll see it right here. Later.